Chapter 1. Arrival. Dreams. Maya? Maya! Maya, wake up! Low rage. I opened my eyes. My neck was stiff. I stretched lazily and assessed where I was out of the corner of my eye. I wasn't in the forest anymore. I was in a bus. The sun streaming through the windows was making it hard to see. The girl next to me was touching my shoulder, disturbed. You can either comfort her with low rage or laugh it off.
It's interesting. When you did this, you snapped at her because you had high rage. Because I have low rage, and the other one was like willpower, right, Tams?
I think so.
To not snap at her. I immediately don't have to snap at her.
It's all right. I squeezed her hand to comfort her. She looked at me concerned. You were laughing, like, maniacally. I blinked. The memory of a dream was still there, and the taste of blood in my mouth. You look outside, or are you glad you weren't alone?
I think I'll look outside.
I looked outside. Trees were pushing up against the narrow road, their boughs tangled, their trunks carpeted with moss. It was the forest from my dreams. We're almost there, the girl said next to me. Her name was Anya. We met a couple weeks earlier on the orientation day. She was from Norway, a tall, broad-shouldered, calm person who wore her long hair in a braid. Somehow I'd managed to talk her into a crazy field trip across the land of my ancestors.
I want to state this. When you and me did this on your version, I remember, like, you guys having the things, like, where you were indicating, like, how much you knew her and stuff like that. Like, if you guys had been friends for a while, like, a couple months. It says here, a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Your options are, we were there to study medicine, or Anya is friendly, and you can say she seemed excited.
I'm going with this one.
Anya is friendly. Anya reached into her backpack and took out 2 apples. I'm really happy we decided to come here, she said. Yeah, I said, offered her some of my cabanossi, dried meaty sausage, that were so much better than the original Polish ones back in the U.S. I was glad Anya had decided to come with me. I had problems keeping friends around and really needed one. I did some searching, she said from over her phone, and this place is amazing. It's the last primordial forest in Europe.
This trip was my idea. I'm so excited about this, by the way. Keep grinning.
Our summer language course was starting in a few weeks, and I'd managed to talk Anya into skipping the tours of concentration camps and old churches and visit the White Tower National Park with me instead. So far it's beautiful, she said, her eyes smiling. But why are we here again?
Good question.
Why were we here? There. Being White Tower, a small village in northeast Poland near the border of Belarus. It was famous for its national park, the very last European bison, and according to a quick web search, occasional tensions between far-right troublemakers and the local Belarusian community. The most honest answer would have been because I've been dreaming of the forest in White Tower since I can remember, but people didn't understand when I said things like that. I looked her in the eyes. I kept it simple so I wouldn't freak her out. I told her as much as I could, or I told her everything and lose a willpower.
I think I'm going to go with I told her as much as I could.
I wanted to see the forest. I heard it was a must. That wasn't technically a lie. And when I was little, my grandfather told me stories about an ancient forest full of wonders and the wolves that lived in it. It was all I got from the part of the family before my mum took me, ran away, and cut off all contact with my dad. But I remembered the stories well, and I remembered the name of the forest. Buzhka White Tower. This will always be our home, my grandfather used to say.
I'll wait for her to respond.
Anya fell silent for a moment, but Anya is friendly. I think it's great that you came from such a magical place, she smiled. The last ancient forest in Europe, thousands of years old. I wasn't sure if I was fond of that magic, but it was hard to ignore. And that was precisely why I needed to do something, anything, about my future. That damn forest and my weird-ass family.
I had a clear goal in mind.
I wasn't there by mistake. I planned this trip for months with a clear goal in mind. I had to face the forest, I had to learn the truth about my roots, or I had to figure out my destiny.
Huh.
Are you a past seeker or a future seer?
Yeah. Okay, Like, all of them kind of have, like, some kind of, like, had to face the forest, learn about the truth about my roots, okay, and I had to find out my destiny. Do I care? I'm gonna go destiny, I think.
Okay. I was gonna say, I think I went with my roots when I played. My grandfather's cryptic remarks, the strange dreams, all the drama with my dad's family, something was coming for me. Something big.
I wasn't sure what to believe.
I wasn't sure if I believed in destiny, but I needed to understand what was happening. I was ready to face whatever fate had in store for me, but now I wasn't so sure if it had been a good idea.
So the reason I went with fate, just so we're understanding, is because I have played with Tammy. I understand how Tammy's campaign worked. And the concept is that the Force theoretically was calling out to me with those dreams. So it's calling for me. It's giving me a fate.
I was his guinea pig.
Also, to be fair, you're coming at a very opportune time.
Okay. Welcome home. White Tower looked like an overexposed photo of a village with the contrast turned all the way up. It was hot, sleepy day. It was a hot, sleepy day on a hot, sleepy street, and everything, the old trees, the yellow grass, the weathered wooden houses, the fences, seemed almost normal. Everything except the shadows. They were sharp, as though they were freshly printed with the darkest of inks.
And they moved.
For a second, I could have sworn they moved. But then I realized it was just a black cat walking on the sidewalk. When it saw me, it stopped in its tracks. I decided to ignore it. I watched it with suspicion, or I tried to pet it.
I'm gonna try to pet the kitty.
Here, kitty, kitty, I said, squatting down and reaching towards the cat. Low rage. It rammed me affectionately with its head and started rubbing against my leg, totally ignored my outstretched hand.
Yes.
Hey, Maya? Anya said, looking at me surprised. Didn't you say your friend would be waiting for us? But he wasn't there, and the cat was still staring at me. Let's go. Anya put her on her backpack. I'm tired, and I really, really need to find a toilet. For a moment, I was tempted to just get out of the sun and worry about my missing friend later. Little rage, I decided I didn't need him, but the meeting was just too important.
I'm gonna go with the meeting was just too important.
Let's just wait a little longer, I said. I don't have his number, and we really need to meet up with him. His name was Bartek. I'd met him online while searching White Tower. The man knew everything there was about local history. I asked him to check some stuff for me. I wasn't really going to tell her this stuff was old legends and prophecies. I hope he's found something. I really need to pee, Anya said, like I was a 5-year-old. and not a very bright one. Low rage, you could give her the puppy dog eyes. Arg, I caved and gain a will, or I tried another approach.
I don't gain a will, I gain a rage.
Whatever.
But I'm going to try another approach.
You know what? I tried another approach. You go. I'll wait here a couple more minutes and then catch up with you. Have it your way. See you at the B&B. Anya grabbed her backpack. I really can't wait any longer. Have fun. She winked at me and walked away. So I waited.
Hey, that's my line. So I waited.
So I waited. And the creepy cat waited with me. Bartek was 15 minutes late, flustered and apologetic. It was his dad's company, he explained while catching his breath. He had to help him out with some paperwork. He seemed uncomfortable with low rage, or I said nothing.
He seemed uncomfortable.
So low rage. I thought you were on summer break, I said, noticing his discomfort. You said you study forestry. I do, but my dad has a lot of different businesses. One of them is loosely connected to wood, so he uses me whenever he can, he said as he rubbed the back of his neck. Fathers, I shrugged. I could understand daddy issues. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had freckles all over his face. Come on. I'll take you to your place. His accent was broad and very Eastern European.
We never see this guy again, do we?
In
your campaign, sorry.
I don't think we saw him very often.
Yeah,
I think there was another time, like, slightly later, but it wasn't for very long.
Yeah, because, like, if I remember correctly, in your campaign, we went to the forest, met up with, that guy, and then
Daniel
never spoke to any of these fuckers again. Oh, except for, of course, the girl, but...
You could flood him with questions. Anya would have liked him, or I caught him looking at me.
Flood him with questions.
Luckily, he loved talking about his home, so I flooded him with questions. He kindly obliged. He talked about how the village had become a tourist destination, how the logging industry had moved to a nearby town, how the trains had stopped coming, and how the local train station had turned into a hotel for wealthy foreign hunters. The dozens and dozens of bison statues scattered around the village watched us indifferently. We walked along the only street in the village, slowly making our way towards the outskirts. The trees were growing denser, their scent becoming richer and more pronounced.
I took a deep breath.
Goal. Destiny. So, what have you found in the way of local folk tales / creepy prophecies / weird shit? I asked. Bartek shook his head. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Sorry. He was avoiding my eyes. A trickle of sweat ran down his temple. Low rage. He said. He looked afraid. What's up, man? I smiled. Spill the beans. I'm a big girl. I can take it. He just clammed up. You know what? I think you should just drop it. I stopped. I felt hurt. He was scared of something, or low rage gives it saying, it was almost too easy.
I think I'm gonna go with that one. So I'm hoping she, like, manipulates him. Rolls that manipulation.
Bartek tensed up, but I just shrugged and smiled. Okay, let's go. And he looked like I'd pulled the rug out from underneath him. But you said it was important. He was ready to crack, or I played the best friend. I played the best friend there was.
See, I think he was ready to crack is what I'm going to go with. Because this takes a will. And I don't really want to do that. I feel a little dirty with that one. So, cunning. Nice.
I got you, laughed and punched him in his arm. I knew you wanted to tell me. The game tracks your decisions on how Maya approaches problems. They will accumulate and gradually reveal what kind of person she is, deep in her heart. The story challenges to reflect Maya's personality. Well, he brushed his forehead with the back of his hand. I did ask. I started with the old people here. I told them that my friend from the States was looking for her roots, and I wanted to know about the place her family came from. You know the drill. At first, people were very, receptive. I waited for the other shoe to drop. And then I mentioned your name. He stood and he shook his head. You could start to lose your temper and gain a rage, or you urge him to continue.
I'm gonna urge him to continue because I'm trying to go low rage.
Complete opposite of me.
Yes.
Bartek, no dramatic pauses, please, I urged him. The tension is killing me. One of the old men told me to go to hell, the other spat on the ground, and his wife crossed herself. For a moment, he looked younger and smaller. And then my own grandmother stopped talking to me. She said something else as well.
That's not what... You read that weird. And my own grandmother told me to stop asking.
Oh, whatever.
That would be harsh if your grandmother's like, I'm no longer going to talk to you, little shit. I tensed up.
What? I asked. She told me to pray for you. Suddenly, the sweet golden afternoon wasn't so sweet and golden anymore. Who was I? I felt shivers run down my spine, or low rage can cause you to laugh.
I laughed.
Nicely done, I punched him in the arm and laughed. I almost thought you were scared of me. Bartek smiled awkwardly. Yeah, it's just old wives' tales. Look at me, I winked at him. Do I look like a big bad wolf to you? We walked in silence, but my mind was in overdrive. People didn't want to talk, and that could only mean one thing.
I was on the right track.
Plus a willpower. Progression. My pulse quickened, and I tensed up like a hound that smelled blood. I was on the right track. Every time you learn or do something significant that brings you closer to your goal, you regain willpower.
Just want to state for the record, though, she, hit the nail on its head. What am I, big bad wolf? And then...
Maybe.
Then she goes on about the fact that she's on the trail like a bloodhound.
Like a hound that smelled blood?
Seriously. Fucking hammer, nail, bang.
Bed and breakfast. White Tower had a few hotels and hostels, but the preferred form of accommodations was bed and breakfasts.
That's where we stayed.
I found one that was nice, clean, and had good reviews. We had a room on the second floor with a huge window and a great view of the forest. Anya was there, already unpacked and chilling in the summer sun. I dropped off my stuff and freshened up a bit. Will you show me around? I asked Bartek. Sure. What did you want to see? Before you go, check out your character sheet and journal. Press respectfully Y or X to open. You can find a load of useful information about Maya, her background, personality, goals, and so on there. You can also check who your friends and who your enemies are. White Tower was a quaint tourist town, but I had other goals in mind.
Okay, so Y brings up the character sheet. Maya, a 24-year-old student from America. I am not brave at all. I have a lot more dots and things overall than I think you did. I think you were brave and inspiring.
I had some analytical, but not much.
Yeah, but I think I already have, at this point in time in the game, I think I have more dots than you did.
I don't know. Maybe.
Okay. And then journal is X. Journals are relatively useless. Okay.
Did you ask Anya to go with you, or did you sneak out, leaving sightseeing to Anya?
I think I'm gonna ask her to come with me. Because, at least with the character, I wouldn't see a reason not to bring her. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Your besties, BFFs. Lay of the land. I had a clear goal in mind. The land was calling me, and I wanted to understand my destiny. Anya and Bartek went with you.
Because I have them both with me, I think I'm going to the town. I was going to go to the forest, but I think I'm actually going to the town with this one.
Okay. Walk around the village. We walked through the village, bathed in the sharp rays of the summer sun. It was a lazy afternoon, disturbed only by the occasional passing car, throwing up clouds of dust that hung in the air long after the vehicle was gone. Anya was walking close to Bartek, asking him about every little detail in the village. People were relaxing or working in their yards, dogs were barking, and every cat we passed froze and looked at us. Low rage? People seemed quite friendly, though. Some of them smiled at us as we passed by, and every once in a while we stopped for some small talk with people who knew Bartek. I expected fewer stares. The cats behaved strangely or low rage. It was just a tourist village.
I think I know about the cats. I'm fixated on these cats.
What's with the cats? I asked as we passed a tabby who stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and meowed at us. I don't know. They're cats. Maybe they just want to make up for the villagers' manners, Bartek shrugged. You know, some people are wary of newcomers. Rage can give you... or xenophobic jerks can give you rage. I was curious why, or, yeah, tourists could be assholes, minus a rage.
As much as I want to actually minus rage to see what happens, I think I'm actually going... Because remember when you minus a rage, you turned fluffy?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like one of those things, but I think I'm just going to go curious why.
Why? I asked candidly. It's complicated, Bartek scratched his neck, embarrassed by the topic. There's a small conflict around the forest, you know. It's like attracting some weird people, activist reporters, bored rich kids. He said, as though his dad didn't own multiple businesses. People like that. And they're getting on the locals' nerves. I noticed Anya frowning, or fair enough.
I'm going to go with I noticed her frowning.
Anya looked skeptical. I looked the conflicts up online, she said, and it didn't look so small. It looked pretty important, actually. For a moment, Bartek looked like he was lost for words. Well, you're not one of those crazies, you're like almost local, he smiled. So, what would you like to see in the village of your ancestors? He spread his arms as if to show me the splendor the village had to offer.
He totally just, ignored what she said.
Yep.
He just basically was like, well, you don't have to worry about the protests. You're not one of those crazies. Anyway, moving on. What did you suggest?
The village. The cats were watching my every move as we walked along the empty streets. You can go for new friends and hidden tensions, the family graves, mysteries of the past, or lost hopes, strange dreams.
That is a tough one. I think I have to hit up all of them. I think it's the concept is just in what order, right?
Yeah.
Left to right?
Sure.
Yeah, let's go left to right.
To the cemetery. Matters of the soul. So, we have quite a few churches here, Bartek explained. As we walked down the road, 2 Orthodox, 1 Catholic, and even 1 Baptist church, he said, as though it were something uncommon. So I asked about it. Was there a synagogue, or it seemed like a lot of churches.
I guess I'll ask about it.
So what's so special about that? I wasn't sure what he meant. He looked at me, a bit disorientated, and then it hit him. Oh, of course, you're not from here. Well, Poland is almost exclusively Catholic, so it's a bit uncommon to have all these denominations in one small village. Any Lutheran churches? Asked Anya. I don't think so. Bartek shook his head as he led us to a small wooden church surrounded by a cemetery. Anyway, even though we have all these churches, there's only one cemetery. The church was Orthodox, but the graves were a mishmash of styles and faiths: Catholic, Orthodox, atheist, everyone resting together. Bartek looked like he didn't approve, which gives you rage. The place reminded you of a forest, or there was something poetic about it and you lose a rage.
I'll go with the middle one.
It's like in the forest, I said, looking at the spruces growing among the graves. It's full of death. It's what's fallen stays where it fell. There's all kinds of trees, bushes, and animals, and life is growing out of it all. Bartek didn't look convinced. Yeah, maybe. He looked at the cemetery, and for a moment he seemed lost in his thoughts. All my family lies here, he said. I mean, the ones that are dead. Hey, what do you think? What do you think happens when you die? I hoped for something fair. I left an echo, or you left an echo, or I don't know, or I didn't know, with low rage.
I'm gonna go with the echo. Spiritual, yes.
You echo for some time, or ripple, I think that everything in this world has a trace. I was looking for the right word, an aura, emanation, call it what you want, and it doesn't dissolve right away. Bartek seemed unsure. Is that like a new age thing? He looked over the cemetery fence. Well, anyway, this is it. The spiritual heart of White Tower. We can go somewhere else if you'd like. So that's where we stood. I wanted to go in, and he was clearly scared to let me enter the cemetery. Was he kidding? With a increase of rage or low rage? I just went in. I just went in, Not so fast. I want to look for my family here, remember? I smiled, opening the gate. Bartek shifted uncomfortably. I don't know if that's a good idea. But why? He was hiding something.
But why?
What are you, 5? What? Why? I turned to him, surprised. I mean, I told you people have weird reactions. Maybe it's better if we to leave it alone. So what are we waiting for? Anya smiled at him. He mumbled something and led us through the Labyrinth of Graves to the far end of the cemetery.
We continued.
Low rage. The walkways were very narrow, and the whole place seemed quite chaotic. Catholic crosses, Orthodox crosses, no crosses at all, huge statues and simple gravestones, graves you couldn't see because of the flowers, and the graves that seemed simply forgotten. And then I saw a woman, tall, broad-shouldered, and long-legged, with gray dreadlocks pinned to the crown of her head. She must have been in her late 40s or early 50s. She was marching through the walkways with fury in her eyes. Bartek quickly stepped between the graves to get out of her way. I walked on, ignoring her. That gives you rage. I did the same, low rage option, or I didn't move, and that'll lose a willpower.
I think I didn't move kind of is a dick move. So if I just move off to the side, I'm being polite.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna do that.
I followed his lead. I think the woman didn't even notice us, lost in her thoughts and anger. Bartek looked at her with a mixture of fear and disdain. She was disturbing. I asked Bartek about her, or I shrugged and went on.
I'm gonna ask about her.
Who was that? I asked, watching the woman leave. Bartek winced. Oh, that's Olga. She's a local activist. She left White Tower when she was 18 or something, and returned a few years back with the notion that she was going to change this place. We continued to the far corner of the cemetery. There, seemingly forgotten and covered with moss, was a lonely grave.
It was damaged.
The tombstone was broken, deliberately. Someone had obviously smashed it with a hammer. The name was half erased.
Excuse me, my line. The name was half erased.
The plaque was also damaged. Someone had tried to scratch out the name, but the letters were still visible.
There was a circle around the grave.
There was a circle of coarse salt around the grave. I'm sorry, Bartek sighed. I didn't want you to see that. I need to know who did this. Increase rage. Was it because of me? Or low rage option, but you lose a willpower. I looked around carefully.
Ooh. If it's one of these last two. I'm gonna look around carefully.
I looked at the scene. The circle around the grave was broken, and the disturbed soil where someone had kicked the salt away was fresh.
There was more.
There was a patch of high grass behind the grave, and I could see something glistening there. A rough wooden cross had been tossed onto the grass. On it had been a silver medallion with a strange figure of a wolf-headed saint. Something was written along the edge of the medallion, but the letters were too small to make out. How dare they? Increase rage, or I let it go.
I let it go. People get angry.
I sighed and looked around. Anya squatted and looked at the plaque. I can't read it. The letters are all wrong. She glanced at Bartek. Is it Russian? Belarusian. The same letters, different language, he explained. There were a lot of them here before the war.
I look at Bartek, hoping for some context.
Bartek put his hands in his pockets. So, you don't know anything about your dad's side of the family? He asked me cautiously. Whatever happened at least 70 years ago, and someone still remembers. I showed him the medallion, or he had a point.
I'm going to show him the medallion.
Look at what I found, I said, showing him the medallion. Does this explain anything? Bartek is sympathetic. He looked at it carefully. It's St. Christopher, based on an old Orthodox icon, he said finally. He's the patron saint of a good death. He helps the dead move on, he squirmed. It's almost like somebody believed that there was a werewolf buried here. He laughed uncomfortably. There wasn't much left to do, or I looked at the grave.
I'll look at the grave.
I looked at the grave for the last time. My family name looked strange, written in unfamiliar Belarusian letters. As we were leaving, I was thinking. I was on to something. +1 willpower.
My line. I don't say much in this series. Okay? Why do you gotta take this from me? Why?
Then you say it.
I'm not a dancing monkey. I will say that I was on to something, and I gained a willpower.
There was something unnatural about my family, and me coming to White Tower had stirred some old demons. I just had to find out what my ancestors were doing there. Maybe that would show me what I was destined to do.
Okay, was it B that got you to open up the diary? Or was it X?
X.
Or was it? There was something that actually is like, hey, maybe my family was like... No, it's not.
Then it would be Y.
Yeah, it's Y then. No. Oh yeah, right there. People were scared when they learned that I was coming to town. Scared enough to destroy my family grave. Someone thought that I came from a family of werewolves. Holy shit, does this hit hard fast. With that thought, I left the cemetery.
The village. It was hot. The day was hot and beautiful, yet I couldn't stop thinking about the devastated grave. New friends, hidden tension, or lost hope and strange dreams.
I'm gonna go to this one. It's interesting though that you actually met her
Olga?
here. Like it's almost like at some point you're gonna meet someone from like what was it, Lisa? Was it?
Yeah, there was Lisa and Cornell, Daniel.
Well, the leader's meditating, but you met the leader of the other group here, right?
Yeah.
So maybe there's a possibility that you actually meet one of the other girls here from his side.
Yeah.
So you meet his, lieutenant or whatever here, while you met the captain here. It's an interesting idea. So we're going to this. Oh fuck, my elbow! I just smacked my own mic. Oh, sorry guys. Oh, that hurts so fucking much when I do that.
A bird of many colors. This is such a nice village, exclaimed Anya as we walked along the quiet streets. Nothing moved. The heat was stifling. I was bored. Increased rage. The village was really quaint. Or I enjoyed the walk. -1 rage.
Oh. See, I'm really afraid of doing this because of that. Of what happened with you.
Yeah.
I want to go with it.
I like how peaceful it is, I admitted. I can finally slow down and just unwind.
I was thirsty?
Let's get something to drink, I proposed. I'm parched. The local store was a large mini-mart, with all kinds of goods, from beer and vegetables to notebooks and pens. There was a bench near the entrance, and on it were a few local drunks. 0 rage. They looked colorful, so I waved at them as we passed. One of them wolf whistled and Bartek winced. I assessed the threat. They were creepy, or 0 rage. They were an easy target for a joke or two.
They're an easy target for a joke or two. Alright, cunning.
Who are you? I laughed at them. The local bums of the year? You must be so proud. Hey, shut it, one of them shouted back. Have some respect. Oh, I'm so sorry, as I said with feigned sympathy. Did you manage to lose that competition as well? For a moment of tense silence, they burst into laughter. We spent some time inside browsing the Latvian, Lithuanian, and Belarusian goods. Why was there almost nothing Polish here? And who, in their right minds, drink coriander soda? I was putting the soda back on the shelf when I heard a commotion coming from outside.
Loud voices.
Some slurs, some curses, and a clear, mockingly polite, I'm so sorry, darlings. I don't understand. Do you like my skirt? Ah, fuck, Bartek murmured under his breath. I looked outside, or 0 rage. I tried to stay out of it.
You know what? Fuck it. Let's go look and see what's happening.
I looked outside. There was someone standing next to the drunkard's bench.
They're definitely not local.
This person was old. Not helpless granny old, but old with deep wrinkles and a narrow mouth. They had the unisex grace of a tired heroin-preserved rockman. Their shoulder-length, disheveled hair completed the look. I totally dug their style, or they looked kind of out of place.
I remember this. You having this exact same discussion, remember?
Yeah, except it wasn't with, drunkards on a bench.
No, but it's the same person. I'll take their style as well, Thames.
They had a peculiar style, fashion that you rarely see, even in the U.S. It looked great on them. They had a clean shave and eyes highlighted with eyeliner. Their nails were painted with bright blue. They wore heavy army boots, an outrageously red skirt, a tank top, and lots of leather jewelry. On their bag there were pins, a lot of pins, all kinds of LGBTQA plus flags, anarchist and pacifist symbols, and I think some German band stripes. Mum would have told me to stay out of it, or low rage. I approached the foreigner. Hello there. Zero rage. I smiled, and ignoring the men, approached the foreigner. Hi, I'm Maya. I just got here, I said. They looked at me with a serene smile. Nice to meet you, Maya, they said with an unmistakably German accent. I'm Kim. I pointed at the drunks. We started talking, or I suggested that we should leave.
Let's just start talking.
What brings you here? I asked. To White Tower, I mean. I came to see the forest, and to protect it. They sounded deadly serious. Me and my friends heard about what's happening here, and we decided to come and help. The men on the bench were looking at us grimly. Hey, someone said suddenly from behind our backs. Kim smiled, and the men on the bench stiffened.
I turned around.
The woman approached us, had the longest, thickest braids I've ever seen. As thick as my arm. You must have tiny arms. There was something faintly Asian about her facial structure, and the men on the bench looked at her with difference. You should stop drinking that moonshine. It makes you pick fights you can't win, she said. I was ready for a fight, or she looked furious.
She looked furious.
And the drunks started explaining themselves. But look at this, Elzunia. One of them, gesturing towards us. For the last fucking time, the name's Lisa. She pronounced it Lisa. And this is my friend. You're to leave them alone. Got it? Her Polish sounded weird, more melodic, or maybe mellower, even when she cursed. The drunkards mumbled and went back to drinking. Thanks, Lisa, she said in English. You shouldn't have. Oh, but I wanted to. I asked who she was, or how did she command so much respect.
I think I'll ask her who she was.
Who are you? I asked. I'm Lisa. I live here. She looked me up and down. And who would you be? This is Maya, smiled Kim. She's not from around here. Oh? Are you here to protest the logging? She raised her eyebrow. Or just a tourist? Why were they logging in a national park? Or why did she expect me to protest?
Why were they logging in a natural park?
Wait, isn't this place like a national park? I asked. Why are they logging here? You'd think they'd leave the oldest forest on the continent, the beating heart of it alone, wouldn't you? She looked at me with a grim expression. It's illegal logging here, Anya chipped in. Wood is money, and there's plenty of wood in this forest. Suddenly, a feeling rushed over me. I was burning, gain a rage, or I was cold.
I was cold. Trying not to get rage.
Suddenly, I felt cold despite the hot, sticky summer air, as though there were a wind from the forest that blew only for me, inside me, chilling my bones and blood. There was something sad and helpless about it, even though it felt all-powerful. A word appeared in my mind, a strange one that was neither Polish nor English. Harano. Lisa looked me in the eyes and spat on the ground. I'd eat those greedy bastards alive.
I noticed Kim watching me.
I felt like I was being watched, and when I looked up, I saw Kim observing me in a curious expression. They were hiding something, or zero rage. They knew what had happened to me.
They knew what happened to me.
Zero rage. I realized they knew. I had just felt this strange connection to the forest. Tell me, I asked. I know you have strange dreams, they whisper. I suspect the forest is reaching out to you. They lean closer to me. You can't escape your destiny. The words were like a punch in the gut. It would be dangerous to even try. I didn't want to hear it, plus rage, or who was I, minus a willpower.
Who was I?
Who am I asked quietly. You can see the invisible, they asked. Or they said, looking at me in the eyes, you'll find the way.
Suddenly I felt confident. Get right back that will.
Woo! And suddenly, I felt a sudden urge of confidence. I can't read today. Oh. Progression in the goal. I wasn't making that up. There was some strange destiny waiting for me, and there were people who knew what was going on. Before I could ask more, Anya and Bartek approached, and Kim shook their head, silencing me. Meet us tomorrow at the logging site. They blew me a kiss, they put their arm around Lisa, and walked away.
We decided to leave as well. There we go.
The village. I kept looking over my shoulder, but no one was following us.
Let's go to the railway.
Train spotting. Bartek wants to show us the most picturesque spot in the area, said Anya. Maybe that's not the right word, he said, frowning. Well, it's not like it's that beautiful, but it has, an atmosphere, a climate. Did he mean cool or ambience?
I'm gonna go with ambience.
Ambience? Anya said it at the same moment as I, and we laughed. Ambience. Bartek smiled, visibly relieved. I meant ambience.
We ended up on some abandoned tracks.
Zero rage. We soon left the village behind and ended up on some abandoned railway tracks. So this is where the magic happens, I grinned, pointing at the empty bottles and some used condoms strewn around the tracks.
That's what the chain would do, and it goes by, it's good.
But with the slow winding river a stone's throw away and the long drooping branches of the old trees shading the unused railway, that place really was picturesque. The bees buzzed around, the birds sang like there was no tomorrow, and the fragrance of herbs hung thick in the air. My head was spinning. Why was the track abandoned? It all felt unreal, or a perfect moment for a cold beer.
I'm gonna go with why was it abandoned? Curiosity. Analytical. Okay.
Why is the railway no longer in use? I asked Bartek. I wish I'd been able to come here by train. The bus was awful. It was a cargo line, he shrugged. I wonder where we were going, or he seemed upset and lose a willpower.
I'm just gonna go, I wonder where we're going. We're not gonna get too deep into it.
Where are we going? I asked, dropping the subject. The line ends at an old train station, but it's a long walk from here. He pointed in the direction of the trees. They turned it into a hotel. You can even spend the night in a luxury train car that belonged to the Tsar. It's a tourist thing. When we entered a dense copse, I don't know that word.
Yeah.
We noticed a woman standing among the trees. It was Lisa! Hello, Bartek, she said.
How did she get there?
How did you get here so fast? I couldn't help but ask. There are shortcuts. She didn't elaborate. Hello, Elizabeta Danilovna.
God, getting really formal there.
Answered Bartek. I could hear something in his voice. Was it fear, respect, anger? I couldn't place it. She smiled. Do you mind if I join you? She asked. I'd rather walk alone. I noticed Bartek getting tense. Or sure, I didn't mind.
I'm struggling between I noticed Bartek getting tense and sure I don't mind. Let's go with the tense, yeah.
I would have went with sure, I don't mind. So what's the story with you two? I asked Bartek. She's from around here. He shook his head, but she helps with the protests. You know, Lisa turned to me. The protests against the logging that his father is so eagerly promotes. Bartek winced and snapped, I guess. Sorry, shouldn't we coexist with the forest? That means taking what we need to survive just as everything does. 6,000 trucks of wood isn't taking what you need, kid. He threw me a glance, looking for help. She has a point. Or people needed to have jobs.
She had a point.
Don't look at me, Bartek. I think it's barbaric. I wasn't about to beat around the bush. If it was about local action, there wouldn't be a problem, Anya chimed in. But it isn't. Giant corporations are at work here with heavy machinery. Ask your friend about his father's money and his clients, Lisa shrugged. Bartek stormed away. I shrugged and followed him. Lisa followed me.
We walked the narrow path.
The path was too narrow for all of us to walk together, so at some point I found myself walking with Lisa. She would squat from time to time and collect some herbs. So, you're looking for your roots? She said after a while. Why? I couldn't resist a mystery. I had dreams. Or why was she asking with zero rage?
I had dreams. I think it's what. Or why was she asking? I had dreams.
I've been having strange dreams, I answered, and I know they have a hidden meaning. You're wiser than you look, she said, surprised. Sit down with me. She nestled amongst the roots of an old tree, reached into her basket, and took out a blunt. Let's have a smoke and I'll tell you a story, she noticed when I hesitated. You need to hear it. I took the blunt or I sat down.
I sat down. Not gonna smoke.
Tangled roots. Lisa let out a cloud of smoke and started talking. From what I learned from Bartek's grandma, you're asking the wrong questions about the wrong people. I decided to cut to the chase, gain a rage. What should I be asking? Or her voice was so soothing.
What should I be asking?
I'm not even sure what I'm looking for, I admitted. This is a tainted land, girl, she continued. So much blood was spilled for Pushka. Almost lost her mind. That Pushka almost lost her mind. Pushka or her?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Pushka. Question mark?
Pushka was one of the words for the forest. Polish had lots of those, and she used it in a weird way. Why do you call the forest Pushka? Isn't lost the right word? I call her Pushka because it's her proper name. She huffed. Los is to Pushka as to what dog is to wolf. There we go.
So both canines, but
domesticated, enslaved, used. Pushka is the
yeah.
Primeval forest, one untouched by humans, primal, strong, and feared.
Literally, what I was about to say was the fact that they're both canines, but one has been domesticated, and then you read the domesticated. So
yeah.
Anyway,
there was admiration in her voice, and I realized that The word sounded like a rustle of leaves, like the wind, pushka. As I was telling you, Pushka almost went mad, and it's not wise to wake those spirits, especially not now. But I needed answers. What spirits? Or I wasn't afraid to stir up memories.
What spirits?
You mean the dead? I asked. She looked at me with those uncanny eyes. Her gaze was almost unbearable. Yeah, unbearable. Hard with anger smoldering somewhere deep within, ready to jump at my throat, and then suddenly something changed. She sighed heavily. You have no idea, do you? About what? Or about the past?
About what?
What do you mean? I asked. So you have no idea who you are, she stated. Nobody told you what it was like here during the war and after it? Her eyes lost focus, as though she was looking at something only she could see. In 1939, when the war broke out, came the first Germans, and then the Russians. You know, they actually worked together. Stalin never forgot that he was beaten by the Poles in 1920. She shot me a glance. I shrugged. I nodded politely.
I nodded politely. Yeah.
I didn't really care. I just nodded politely. Oh, you have no idea what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter. Really. She took a drag. Anyway, many millions of lives later, Stalin and Hitler stopped sleeping together, so to speak. And the Germans came. And then the Russians again. And then were the forest soldiers. The forest part got my attention. I listened, holding my breath.
Forest part got my attention.
I nodded so that she would continue. The forest part got my attention. They started as Polish soldiers, but then the war ended, and they became guerrillas to fight the Russian occupation, and then they ended up as desperate bandits. She sighed. For the people who lived here, they were all the same. Germans, Russians, forest soldiers. They killed, they maimed, they tortured, and burned villages. It didn't matter what language they spoke. It didn't. What did that have to do with me? How did she know? Or she looked sad.
What did it have to do with me?
Everything. Thanks for the history lesson, I said. But where do I fit in any of that? Or in all of that? All of it. My great-grandparents were from here, she sighed. After the war, there were some changes, and my whole family went to Siberia to die, or were sent to Siberia to die. My grandmother was the only one who survived. She met a Buryat shaman, and here I am. But your story is tangled with all of this. She looked straight at me. There's a lot buried in your past, and it weighs on your future.
Suddenly I felt dizzy.
It's from smoke. I'm just kidding.
Yep.
I wanted to answer, but suddenly I felt dizzy. The smoke from her joint smelled funny. The forest moss, strange herbs, and ash and blood. I was drifting away, you spend a willpower, and I tried to stay focused.
I'm going to spend a willpower and try to stay focused.
I focused and understood that the strange feeling came from within. It was like a long-forgotten dream, like an ancient memory suddenly brought to life. I let it in. Spiritual. I was sitting around the fire deep in the pushka. The others were sleeping. I listened to the whisper of the leaves. The forest was speaking to me, demanding action. It wants me to be its revenge, or I find no joy in the task.
I find no joy in this task.
I understand what has to be done, even if I find no joy in it. Soon I will wake the others and tell them the plan. Tomorrow, we're going to burn a village. I sit by the fire and listen to the wolves howling to the moon, weeping for their slain brothers and sisters.
Then the vision ends.
When I came to my senses, Lisa was still looking at me. I got defensive, +1 rage. I ran it over in my head, or it was a lot to take in.
I ran it over in my head.
If I understood what you're saying, I looked at her. Something from my family's past cast shadows on my future. She shrugged. I've told you everything I know. If you want more, talk to my girlfriend. We'll be at the logging site tomorrow. Yeah, good idea.
My line. Yeah, good idea. Gain a willpower.
I stopped. Go, progression! I will, I said. Now, I finally knew who and what to ask. There you are, Bartek waved at me. I thought I'd lost you.
Setting my goodbyes to Lindsay and we went back.
Lisa.
What did I say? Lindsay? Why did I say Lindsay? Lisa. Yeah, the other Lindsay.
The village. The bison statues were watching me with their creepy painted eyes as though they knew me.
We called it a day and went back.
The first evening. The B&B was quaint. I left Anya and Bartek outside. They looked like they needed some time alone to say their goodbyes. When I got out of the shower, Anya was back smiling and a little flustered. What a day, she smiled. So, what do you think? I made a quick mental inventory of everything that had happened that day. They were cutting down the forest. I remembered the scene at the shop. I mentioned the graveyard, or I told Lisa what happened when I talked with Lisa.
Let's go with the top to bottom here.
I can't believe they're logging here. I shook my head. Isn't the forest UNESCO list or something? Yeah, I know. I want to check out this protest people are talking about. Maybe we could go there tomorrow? I remember the scene of the shop, mentioned the graveyard.
It's the same stuff, you don't have to repeat it.
Remember the shop? The tension seemed almost unnatural. A few words more and it would have been a regular fight. Maybe they just envied Kim's style, Anya tried to joke, but she seemed worried.
I mentioned the graveyard.
What happened here that people are still vandalizing my family's grave? What did my grandfather do? She put a hand on my shoulder. Whatever it was, it's not your fault. It wasn't, but it could be my responsibility.
Now, do I want to tell her about what happened when I talked to Lindsay? Or just... No, I think I'm going to leave that alone. Because that one's a little bit too crazy. And she's actually quite loyal. It's actually kind of surprising how loyal I've made her.
You know what? I'm seriously tired. Let's call it a day, shall we? Soon we were both in our beds, ready to sleep. Zero rage. Even though I was tired, sleep didn't come quickly. Anxiety was spreading its cold, writhing roots deep in my chest and stomach. I lay there for some time looking at the silver rectangle painted on the wall by the moonlight. So much was happening to me. I could feel everything boiling, lots and lots of threads entwining. It was one of these threads. I was one of these threads, and my role would soon be uncovered.
I felt I was closer to getting the answers. Gain a willpower. Max willpower!
Goal progression. I felt that the answers I was looking for were within my reach. I just had to go and see the logging protest, meet the right people, and make them talk. After a long while, all these thoughts became blurry. They slowly started to turn into pictures, sounds, and colors.
I drifted off.
A night in the woods. Zero rage. In a big city, old men sit in leather chairs, lazily enjoying their ever-growing wealth. They watch White Tower on flickering screens. They watch me. I tremble. Something is coming. It's huge and monstrous. I am a cub, or I am a seed.
I think I'm going to go with I'm a cub.
I am a wolf cub, like the ones my grandfather told me about. I will grow, and my fangs will become sharper. I will taste blood. I feel a pull and I surrender to it. I run toward a clearing. There are piles of fresh corpses of people who died too young, skinned and mutilated. Their loved ones stand around them, grieving, unable to do anything, waiting. And suddenly, there are just trees and tree trunks. I look around, I weep, or I start dancing.
I'm gonna go with either I look around or I weep. I'm gonna go with I weep.
That spirit, though. I weep, and other voices join me, terrified and hollow. The trees are dead, and I am here to help console their spirits. There is a stench in the air, like rotting meat and acid, but somehow worse. I see the monstrous army. Their mandibles are whirling chainsaws. Their long metal arms are wrapped with black pipes that seem like glistening intestines. Their smell is vile. They wait, unmoving. I charge at them, plus a rage. I turn to the forest for answers, or I pay my respects to the dead.
I pay my respects to the dead.
I go to the dead trees, kneel next to them. Words come to me in a language I don't remember, but that I know. Words about revenge and death and sacrifice. And then my voices tell me to look to the sky. There, between the stars, two shapes circle each other, an old sad wolf with gray hair and a white weasel. They keep their eyes on one another as they continue their dance, suspicious but not hostile. We need to fight the enemy, the awful rotting stench. I know that much, but how can we do that when we don't trust each other? They stop, they look at me at the clearing. I look at them, cautious, or I give them my blessing.
I give them my blessing because I'm spiritual.
Spiritual response. I spill my blood and bless them with words that I do not recognize, but I understand. They come down to me, their voice is the voice of the Pushka. Come here, cub. We have great things ahead of us.
I wake